Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
A few years back, my wife and I were finally ready to take the plunge on our first home renovation. We'd been living in this tiny flat for 3 years, and the kitchen was straight out of the 1980s. The bathroom wasn't much better. We'd been saving every penny for months, skipping takeaways and nights out, just to get enough cash together for a proper renovation. I wanted to hire a professional builder, someone we could find online with good reviews, someone who would treat this like a business transaction. Clean, simple, no complications. But my wife had other ideas. She suggested we use her sister's husband, who had started running his own building company. I told her I'd rather keep family and business separate, but she insisted he would do a good job and it would keep the money in the family. She also mentioned he'd given us a really good quote. That last part got me. The quote was about 15% cheaper than the others we'd gotten. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Biggest mistake I ever made. The first week started well enough. Her brother-in-law showed up on time with his crew, and they got to work immediately. They ripped out everything. Kitchen cabinets, sink, countertops, the lot. In the bathroom, they pulled out the old suite, tore up the tiles, everything. Within 3 days, we were basically camping in our own home. But then something weird happened. Day 4, no one showed up. Day 5, still nothing. I tried calling him, asking when he was planning to come back since the flat was completely torn apart. No response. I tried texting. Nothing. My wife tried calling her sister. My wife asked her sister what was going on with the renovation since her husband wasn't answering his phone. That's when we found out he'd gone to Spain for 2 weeks on a last-minute holiday deal. He hadn't bothered to tell us anything. We had no kitchen, no bathroom, and this guy had just disappeared on holiday without telling us. We ended up having to stay with friends for nearly 2 weeks, bouncing between different couches like we were homeless. When he finally came back, he acted like nothing had happened. He just said it was time to get back to work. I asked if he was serious, pointing out that he'd vanished for 2 weeks without saying anything and we'd been living like refugees. His response was a casual apology, saying it was a good deal on the holiday and he couldn't pass it up. That was it. No real apology, no explanation of how he was going to make up for lost time. Just back to work like nothing had happened. Except he wasn't really back to work. He'd show up around 10 in the morning, mess around for an hour or two, then disappear again. Sometimes he wouldn't show up at all. When I'd call to ask where he was, he'd say he was dealing with another job or had to pick up materials. I pointed out that this was supposed to be a 2 to 3 week job maximum, and we were 5 weeks in with barely anything done. He brushed me off, saying these things take time and you can't rush quality work. Meanwhile, I could see he was juggling at least 3 other jobs. He'd get phone calls constantly, always promising other customers he'd be there soon. We were clearly not his priority. The place still looked like a bomb had gone off. Bare walls, exposed pipes, dust everywhere. We were still staying with friends most nights because it was impossible to live there. But here's where it gets really infuriating. Before all this started, I had this butcher's block from a furniture store. Nothing fancy, just a solid wood surface I've been using for years. It was freestanding, so it didn't fit with the new kitchen design we'd planned. One day, the brother-in-law asked what I was going to do with the butcher's block when the new kitchen went in. I told him I hadn't really thought about it and would probably get rid of it. He asked if he could take it, saying he could use something like that in his workshop. I agreed, telling him to take it when he was done with the renovation. I figured the job would be finished soon anyway, so why not? At least someone would get use out of it. Well, one day I came home to check on the progress. The kitchen was still a shell. The bathroom was half finished. But sitting there in the middle of the chaos was my butcher's block, and it looked incredible. He'd spent hours sanding it down, applying oil, polishing it until it gleamed. The thing looked better than when I'd first bought it. I stood there staring at it, realizing this guy has spent more time and care on refinishing my old butcher's block than he had on the entire renovation. While we were sleeping on friends' couches and living without basic facilities, he was treating my cast-off furniture like a precious antique. That's when I completely lost it. I dragged that butcher's block outside to the courtyard. I went to my toolbox and pulled out the biggest hammer I could find. Then I went to town on that thing. I smashed it into pieces, taking out weeks of frustration with every swing. The beautiful finish he'd spent hours perfecting was gone in minutes. I threw every piece into the wheelie bin. The next morning he showed up for his usual hour of pretend work. He walked into the flat, looked around, and noticed the butcher's block was gone. He asked where it was, looking confused. I just looked at him and shrugged, asking what butcher's block he was talking about. He looked confused and disappointed, like a kid who'd lost his favorite toy. He kept looking at the spot where it had been, but he never asked about it again. The job dragged on for another 4 weeks. 9 weeks total for what should have been 3 weeks maximum. When it was finally finished, the work was decent enough, but the whole experience had been a nightmare. My wife never said a word about using family for renovations again, and her brother-in-law never brought up the butcher's block. To this day, neither of us has mentioned it. The kitchen and bathroom turned out fine in the end, but I learned that next time we need work done, I'm hiring a complete stranger with good reviews and a professional attitude. No family discounts, no special treatment, just someone who shows up when they say they will and does the job properly. I bought a new one for the finished kitchen. This time I made sure to keep it. I work as a front desk receptionist at this mid-sized corporate office. The building houses several companies, and we handle all the visitor check-ins for everyone. Most days are pretty routine, signing in delivery people, calling up to let employees know their lunch has arrived, and directing lost visitors to the right floor. The company has always been pretty strict about security, but last month things got even tighter. We had some incident where someone wandered into areas they shouldn't have been in, and management freaked out. They sent out memo after memo about tightening security protocols and making sure we follow procedures to the letter. Then last week we got the email. It came from the head of security with copies to all the building managers. The subject line was in all caps about a new visitor policy that was effective immediately. When I opened it, I couldn't miss the message. It was bolded, underlined, and written in red text saying that all guests must sign in and wait for security clearance before entering with no exceptions. The email went on to explain that this meant everyone, delivery people, clients, vendors, employees from other companies in the building, literally everyone who didn't work directly for our company. It said we needed to check their ID, have them sign the visitor log, give them a temporary badge, and call security to verify they were expected before letting them through to the elevators. My supervisor pulled me aside after we all read the email. She told me this was serious and that the big bosses upstairs were really concerned about security right now. She acknowledged it seemed like overkill but said we needed to follow this exactly as written. I asked if this applied even to people we knew, like the regular delivery guys. She reminded me that the email said no exceptions. And that meant no exceptions. She said it was better to be safe than sorry. Part of me was excited about having clear rules to follow. Usually I had to make judgment calls about who looked official enough to just wave through, and it always made me nervous. Now I had black and white instructions. The first few days were pretty smooth. A few people grumbled about the new process taking longer, but most were understanding. The delivery drivers rolled their eyes but signed in without much fuss. Even some of the executives from other companies in the building were patient about it. Then Wednesday morning happened. I was settling in with my coffee around 7:30 a.m. when the elevator doors opened and out walked the chief executive officer of our company. He's not someone I interact with much, he's usually in meetings or traveling, but everyone knows who he is. He's probably in his 50s, always wearing expensive suits, and has that confident way of walking. He gave me his usual polite nod and smile when he headed straight for the elevator bank that goes up to the executive floors. This was his normal routine when he had early meetings, but then I remembered the email. All guests must sign in, no exceptions. I took a deep breath and called out to him. He stopped and turned around looking slightly surprised that I was addressing him. I held up the clipboard with the visitor sign-in sheet and apologized, explaining that I needed him to sign in and wait while I called security for clearance. His eyebrows went up and he looked genuinely confused. He asked me what I was talking about. I explained that we had a new visitor policy as of last week and that everyone needed to sign in and get security clearance before entering. He pointed out that he wasn't a visitor and that he worked here. I told him I understood, but that the policy email had been very clear about no exceptions. I could see him processing this. He looked like he was trying to figure out if I was joking or if this was some kind of test. He asked if I was telling him he needed permission to enter his own building. I explained that I was just following the policy and that it had been very clear about no exceptions. For a moment I thought he might argue or pull rank, but then something interesting happened. He actually looked amused, maybe even impressed that someone was actually following the rules exactly as written. He said that he supposed rules were rules. He walked over to my desk and took the clipboard. When he filled out his information, I picked up the phone to call security. I told him I had someone at the front desk requesting access to the executive floor, and when I looked at the clipboard, I said his name and mentioned that he claimed to be the chief executive officer. There was a long pause on the other end. The security person asked me to repeat what the visitor had said he was. I confirmed that he said he was the chief executive officer and asked if I should send him up. They told me to hold on while they checked on that and said they'd call me back. The CEO was sitting in one of the visitor chairs, checking his phone. He seemed remarkably patient about the whole thing. Other employees walking by were doing double takes, clearly confused about why the CEO was sitting in the lobby like any other visitor. The minutes ticked by. 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 10 minutes. Finally, my phone rang. Security told me I could send him up. I thanked them and hung up, then looked at the CEO and told him he was all set while handing him his temporary badge. He thanked me for following procedure. He didn't sound sarcastic or angry. If anything, he seemed genuinely appreciative that someone was taking the security policy seriously. When he walked to the elevator, he turned back and asked what my name was. I told him I worked the front desk. He told me to keep up the good work. The elevator doors closed and I sat back down, my heart still racing a little from the whole interaction. The next morning I came in to find a new email in my inbox. Same sender as before, head of security. The subject line was about a visitor policy clarification. I opened it with a sinking feeling. The email said that after review of the new visitor policy, we should use discretion when dealing with executive-level personnel. It explained that senior management and executives could proceed directly to their destinations without the standard visitor protocol. I stared at the screen for a long moment. So much for no exceptions. My supervisor walked by my desk and asked if I had seen the new email. I told her I had. She said it was probably for the best and asked if I could imagine making the CEO wait in the lobby every morning. I didn't mention that I could imagine it because I'd actually done it. Following the rules exactly as written only works until someone important enough gets inconvenienced. But here's the thing that still makes me smile when I think about it. For 10 whole minutes, the chief executive officer of a major corporation sat in the lobby, like any other visitor, following the same rules as everyone else. And he didn't throw a fit, demand special treatment, or threaten to have me fired. Unlike some people who come through those doors, he actually had enough class to follow the policy he'd probably approved in the first place, even if that policy got quietly changed the very next day to make sure it would never happen again. I'm a doctor, and I've worked as a doctor in the emergency department for about 8 years now. You'd think after all this time I'd be used to dealing with difficult patients and their families, but some days still catch me off guard, and this Tuesday was one of them. It started like any other shift. I was covering the pediatric section of the emergency room, and we were having a quiet day. My colleague, Dr. Dan, was handling the general emergency cases. He's one of the most patient doctors I know, always taking his time to explain things to worried parents. Around 2 p.m. this woman rushed in carrying her daughter who looked to be about 7 years old. The little girl was crying, but not in the way kids do when they're seriously hurt. It was more like the crying you hear when a child is scared or overwhelmed by all the commotion. The woman shouted for help, claiming her daughter was badly injured and needed to see a doctor right away. The triage nurse quickly looked at the situation and directed them to doctor. Dan. I was in the next room treating a boy with a broken arm, but I could hear everything through the thin walls. Dr. Dan introduced himself and asked what had happened. The woman explained that her daughter had fallen off her bike and scraped her knee, insisting it was a severe injury that needed immediate attention. I looked over when I had a chance, and honestly, I've seen worse injuries from kids tripping on sidewalks. The little girl had a small scratch on her knee that had already stopped bleeding. It was the kind of thing that would heal perfectly, with just a good cleaning and maybe a bandage. The doctor told her he could see the small scrape and that he would clean it up and take a proper look. He was being incredibly gentle with the child, talking to her in a soothing voice while he cleaned the scratch. The little girl had actually stopped crying by this point and was looking around the room with curiosity. After examining the wound, Dr. Dan delivered the good news that it was a very minor injury. He explained that the scratch was superficial and had already stopped bleeding on its own. He said he would clean it thoroughly and put a bandage on it, but told them that the girl would be perfectly fine. That's when Karen lost it. She couldn't believe he was calling it minor and started yelling about how he needed to look at her daughter properly. She claimed the child could have permanent damage and accused him of medical negligence. Dr. Dan told her he understood her concern but said that the injury was not serious. He explained that the scratch was very shallow and would heal completely within a few days. The woman wasn't having any of it. She accused him of not taking the situation seriously and claimed he was ignoring her daughter's injuries. She said his response was completely unacceptable. I finished up with my patient and stepped closer to the doorway. Something about the woman's tone was making me uncomfortable. Dr. Dan remained calm and professional, continuing to treat the little girl who was now more interested in the colorful bandages than her tiny scratch. The doctor explained that he had been practicing medicine for 15 years and could tell her with complete confidence that her daughter would be just fine. He said this type of injury was very common in children and would heal without any complications. Karen became even more worked up and told him not to dare dismiss her. She insisted she knew her daughter and that this was a serious situation. The woman was getting more upset by the minute. Her daughter was sitting there perfectly calm, swinging her legs and playing with a toy the nurse had given her. It was clear the child was not in any distress. Dr. Dan tried once more to reason with her, saying he understood her concern as a mother, but that she needed to trust his medical judgment. He emphasized that her daughter had received appropriate care for her injury. That's when it happened. Without any warning, Karen raised her hand and slapped Dr. Dan across the face. The sound echoed through the small room, and everyone froze. She yelled at him about how he dared to ignore her daughter's serious injuries. Dr. Dan stumbled back more from shock than from the force of the slap. His hand went to his cheek and I could see the red mark forming. The little girl started crying again, clearly frightened by her mother's outburst. I immediately stepped into the room. This woman had just assaulted a colleague who was trying to help her child. I told her that she needed to calm down right away and pointed out that Dr. Dan had been providing excellent care for her daughter. She told me to stay out of it and continued her rant about the incompetent doctor ignoring her daughter's severe injuries. She turned back toward Dr. Dan and I could see she was raising her hand again. She was actually going to hit him a second time. That's when my training kicked in. When she swung her arm toward him again, I grabbed her wrist but carefully. I'm trained in restraint techniques for situations exactly like this. Using her own momentum against her, I guided her down to the floor in a controlled manner, making sure she didn't get hurt in the process. Karen screamed at me to let go of her and threatened to sue us all for assault. I kept her safely on the floor while explaining that she had just struck a doctor who was treating her child and that I was restraining her for everyone's safety. I held her there while Dr. Dan called security. The woman continued to yell and threaten lawsuits, while her poor daughter sat on the examination table crying. One of the nurses went over to comfort the child. Security arrived within minutes, and I carefully transferred the woman to their custody. They held her while Dr. Dan called the police to report the assault. When the police officer arrived, he said they would need statements from both doctors and anyone else who witnessed the incident. Karen immediately claimed that we had attacked her and demanded that we be arrested instead. The officer told her that they had multiple witnesses who saw her strike the doctor first and told her that she was being arrested for assault. The police officer read Karen her rights while she continued to protest her innocence. Social services was called to ensure the little girl was okay and had someone to care for her while her mother was being processed. When they led Karen away in handcuffs, she was still yelling about how we had ignored her daughter's severe injuries. The irony wasn't lost on any of us that her daughter was now genuinely upset and traumatized, but not from a tiny scratch on her knee. The little girl ended up going home with her grandmother, who arrived shortly after and was mortified by her daughter's behavior. She apologized repeatedly to all of us and seemed like a lovely woman who clearly had no idea her daughter was capable of such behavior. The grandmother told us how sorry she was for what happened and said she couldn't believe her daughter would do something like this. Dr. Dan was a complete professional throughout the entire ordeal. Even after being assaulted, his main concern was making sure the child was okay and not traumatized by witnessing her mother's behavior. Karen ended up being charged with assault and was banned from the hospital. I'm 26 and my girlfriend is 24. We've been together for about 2 years now, and we have a beautiful 7-month-old daughter together. My girlfriend has this older brother who's 28. He's one of those entitled guys who thinks everyone else should drop everything to help him whenever he needs something. From day one, this guy has made it clear he doesn't like me. I'm not sure what his problem is exactly. Maybe it's because I'm not impressed by his constant bragging about his job or his fancy car. Maybe it's because I don't laugh at his jokes that are usually at someone else's expense. Or maybe he just doesn't think I'm good enough for his sister. Either way, we don't talk. The only time he contacts my girlfriend is when he needs something, which happens way more often than it should. The guy has a 4-year-old son from a previous relationship. The kid is actually great. Sweet, well-behaved, funny. We've babysat him probably a dozen times over the past year. Every time it's the same story. Her brother calls up with some last-minute request because he wants to go out with his current girlfriend, or he has some work thing or whatever excuse he comes up with. My girlfriend always says yes because she loves her nephew, and she feels bad saying no to family. I usually don't mind watching the kid. Like I said, he's a good kid, and my daughter seems to enjoy having him around. But there's always been this pattern where her brother just assumes we'll be available whenever he needs us. He never asks if we have plans. He never offers to pay us or even bring food for his son. He just expects us to drop everything and help him out. So anyway, Father's Day was coming up this Sunday. My very first Father's Day. I've been looking forward to it for weeks. I had this whole vision of just spending a quiet day with my girlfriend and our daughter. Maybe making breakfast together, going for a walk in the park, just enjoying being a little family. Nothing fancy, but something special for me. On Wednesday, my girlfriend gets a call from her brother. I can hear him talking loudly through the phone even though I'm in the other room. When she hangs up, she comes over to me with this look on her face that I've learned to recognize. It's the look she gets when she's about to ask me something she knows I won't want to do. She told me that her brother had called and wanted to know if we could watch his son on Sunday. He and his girlfriend wanted to go to some fancy brunch and then spend the day together. I asked her if she had told him no, and she said she told him she would have to ask me first. I explained to her that it was Father's Day, my first Father's Day, and I really wanted to spend it with just the three of us. She got this look on her face like I just told her I wanted to kick a puppy. She said it was just one day and we could still spend time together. She pointed out that his son would be there too, so I'd still be around kids. I told her that wasn't the point. I wanted to spend my first Father's Day with my own daughter, with our family. I reminded her about her first Mother's Day and how it was just the three of us, and that's exactly how she wanted it. She said that was different, but when I asked how it was different, she just said it was, and called me selfish. I pointed out that her brother only calls when he needs something and has never once offered to help us with anything. I mentioned that he doesn't even like me and now he wants us to babysit on Father's Day so he can go on a date. She just kept saying he was family, so I reminded her that I was family too, and so was our daughter. The conversation went in circles for a while. She kept insisting that I was being unreasonable and that it was just one day. I kept trying to explain that it wasn't just any day, it was Father's Day, and I wanted to spend it focusing on being a dad to our daughter. Finally, I put my foot down and told her the answer was no. I said I wasn't babysitting on Father's Day, and if she wanted to help her brother, she could take our daughter and go to his place. But I wasn't doing it. She got quiet after that, but not the good kind of quiet. The angry, passive-aggressive kind of quiet. She called her brother back and I could hear her telling him that I had said no. She agreed with him that I was being difficult and said she couldn't convince me. The next few days were hell. She barely spoke to me except to make sarcastic comments about how I was too good to help family or how I was being incredibly selfish for wanting to spend Father's Day with my daughter. She'd slam things around the kitchen and give me these looks like I was the worst person in the world. On Friday, she tried one more time. She said she'd been thinking and maybe we could compromise by watching him for a few hours and then having the rest of the day to ourselves. I told her that a compromise would be him asking us to babysit on literally any other day. I reminded her that I'd babysat his kid plenty of times without complaint and I wasn't asking for much here. She accused me of ruining Father's Day for everyone, but I insisted that I wasn't ruining anything and was just asking to spend my first Father's Day with my daughter. Saturday night, she was still giving me the cold shoulder. I was starting to wonder if I was actually being unreasonable. Maybe I should just suck it up and help out. But then I remembered how special her first Mother's Day was to her, and how she talked about it for weeks afterward. I remembered how she wanted it to be just us, and how I made sure that happened for her. Sunday morning came, and I woke up determined to have a good day regardless of the tension. I made coffee and was getting ready to make breakfast when my girlfriend's phone rang. It was her brother. I could hear him yelling through the phone. Apparently, his girlfriend had gotten food poisoning and they couldn't go to brunch. He was demanding that my girlfriend come over immediately to help take care of both his girlfriend and his son. My girlfriend told him she couldn't right now because it was Father's Day, and they had plans. He asked what plans and said she was just sitting around the house. He said he needed help. She told him that maybe he should have thought of that before he made plans on Father's Day. I was shocked. She was actually standing up to him for once. He said not to give him that crap and accused her of being just selfish like her boyfriend. That's when something clicked for my girlfriend. I could see it in her face. She suddenly realized what I'd been trying to tell her all along. She told him that he was right. She was being selfish. She was being selfish with her time because she wanted to spend Father's Day with her family. The family that actually matters to her every day, not just when they need something. He asked what that was supposed to mean and she told him it meant he should find someone else to help him because they were busy. Then she hung up on him and looked at me with tears in her eyes. She apologized over and over saying I was right, and she didn't know why she couldn't see it before. We had the most perfect Father's Day after that. Just the three of us, exactly like I'd wanted. We made pancakes together, went to the park, and spent the whole day just being a family. Her brother called 6 more times, but she didn't answer. His girlfriend was fine by evening. Turns out it wasn't food poisoning at all, just a hangover from the night before. But by then, my girlfriend had already realized what her brother was really like and how he'd been taking advantage of her kindness for years. We still babysit his son sometimes, but only when it works for us. And her brother had to find other people to manipulate because my girlfriend finally sees him for what he really is. I'm 14 and I've been living in this weird bubble where I thought some of the stuff my mom does was normal. Spoiler alert, it's not. My family situation is complicated. My parents got divorced when I was 10 and somehow we ended up with 2 houses on the same street. My dad lives in one, my mom in the other, and us kids bounce between them. My older brother just graduated high school last week, and let me tell you, that graduation was a whole production. My mom had been planning it for months like it was her own wedding or something. She bought a new dress, got her hair done, and kept talking about how proud she was of her achievement. I thought she just meant she was proud of my brother, which would be normal parent behavior. But looking back now, I should have seen the red flags. The graduation ceremony itself was fine. My brother walked across the stage, got his diploma, and we all cheered. My mom was crying happy tears and taking about a million photos. She kept saying things about how she did it and how they finally made it, which seemed a little weird since she wasn't the one graduating, but again, I thought she was just being an emotional parent. After the ceremony, we all went out to dinner to celebrate. My mom spent the entire time talking about how hard the last 4 years had been for her, how she had to make sure my brother did his homework, how she had to drive him to school every day, how she sacrificed so much for his education. My brother barely got a word in about his own graduation, but he's used to mom making everything about herself, so he just nodded and ate his food. When we got home, my brother put his diploma on the dining room table and went to his room to change out of his graduation clothes. I figured he'd take it with him when he went back to Dad's house later, since that's where he's been staying most of the time lately. The next day, I was helping Mom clean up after the graduation party when I noticed the diploma still sitting there on the table. I asked her if my brother had left his diploma and whether she wanted me to call him to pick it up or if I should walk it over to our other house where Dad lives. That's when she told me something that made my jaw drop. She said the diploma wasn't left behind at all. She said it was hers now. I was so confused that I could barely get out a confused what in response. Then she explained her twisted logic. She told me that she deserved all her kids' high school diplomas because she gave birth to us and raised us. She said that made the diplomas her achievement, not ours. I just stood there staring at her. My brain was trying to process what she just said, but it was like trying to understand a foreign language. She was completely serious too. No joking, no sarcasm. She genuinely believed that my brother's diploma belonged to her. I tried to point out that it was his name on the diploma and that he was the one who did all the work. But she wasn't having any of it. She went into this whole speech about how she was the one who made sure he got up every morning, drove him to school when he missed the bus, helped him with his homework, paid for his school supplies, and went to every parent-teacher conference. She said that without her, there would be no diploma at all. I told her that all of that was just being a parent and that it was what she was supposed to do. But she twisted it around and said that since she did her job as a parent, she had earned that diploma just as much as he did. Actually, she claimed she earned it more than he did because he wouldn't have been able to do any of it without her. I could feel my face getting hot. This was so wrong on so many levels, but I didn't know how to argue with her. She had this way of twisting things around so that she always came out looking like the victim or the hero. I asked her what would happen when I graduated and whether she was planning to take my diploma too. She told me that of course she would take it. She explained that all her children's diplomas belonged to her and that she already had a special display case picked out for them. That's when it hit me. She wasn't just being weird about this one thing. This was part of a bigger pattern. She did this with everything. When my brother made honor roll, she posted about it on social media like it was her accomplishment. When I won a school art contest, she hung my certificate in her bedroom instead of mine. She always found a way to make our achievements about her. I decided to call my dad and tell him what happened. He lives literally across the street, so I walked over there and explained the whole crazy situation to him. My dad was absolutely shocked when I told him what Mom had said. He said he couldn't believe she was keeping my brother's diploma and claiming it belonged to her because she raised him. I confirmed that's exactly what happened and told him she wouldn't listen to me when I tried to argue with her. He told me not to worry and that he would handle the situation. I could tell he was furious. My dad walked right over to Mom's house with me following behind. I could tell he was angry because he gets this little muscle twitch in his jaw when he's trying not to explode. Dad immediately confronted Mom and accused her of stealing our son's diploma. Mom got defensive and said she hadn't stolen anything, claiming it rightfully belonged to her. Dad pointed out that the diploma had my brother's name on it, not hers, and demanded she hand it over. But Mom doubled down and tried to explain how much work she put into getting him through high school and how she deserved recognition for that. Dad agreed that she deserved recognition but told her that didn't mean she got to keep his actual diploma. He called her behavior insane. Mom got even more upset when he called her insane and reminded him that she was my brother's mother. But Dad wasn't backing down. He told her that being a mother didn't give her the right to steal her son's achievements and threatened to call the school to report the diploma as stolen if she didn't give it back. Mom went completely white when he said that. She hadn't thought about the fact that, technically, taking someone else's diploma might actually be illegal. She challenged him and said he wouldn't dare make that call. Dad told her to try him because he wasn't going to let her steal from his son. There was this long staring contest between them, and finally Mom stomped over to the table and grabbed the diploma. She angrily told him he could have it, but that she wanted everyone to know she was the real reason my brother graduated. Dad just told her whatever helped her sleep at night. She shoved the diploma at my dad and slammed the door in our faces. We walked back to his house, and he immediately texted my brother to come pick up his diploma. When my brother showed up and heard what happened, he wasn't even surprised. He just shook his head and said this was exactly why he'd been staying at Dad's house more often lately. Apparently, Mom had been dropping hints for weeks about how the diploma should really belong to her since she did all the work. My brother took his diploma and said he was going to keep it at Dad's house where it would be safe. Then he looked at me and gave me some advice that really stuck with me. He told me not to let her do this to me when I graduate and reminded me that my achievements belong to me, not her. That night, I stayed up thinking about everything that had happened. I started remembering all the times Mom had taken credit for things I did, or made my accomplishments about her somehow. Like when I made the soccer team and she posted on Facebook about what a great job she did raising an athlete. Or when I got straight A's and she told everyone how she was such a good parent for making sure I studied. I realized that my mom doesn't see me and my brother as separate people. She sees us as extensions of herself, like our successes are her successes and our failures are her failures. It's messed up, but at least now I can see it for what it is. A few days later, my brother got a call from his school saying they needed to verify some information on his diploma for his college enrollment. When they asked to speak with him about his graduation, Mom tried to get on the phone and explain how she was the one who really earned the diploma. The school administrator was so confused that they asked to speak with my dad instead. Mom was humiliated, and she finally seemed to understand that no one else saw her logic as reasonable. My diploma is going straight to Dad's house, and Mom can display her participation trophy from the parents' door if she wants recognition so badly. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.